That's right. You're listening to another episode of the co-main event mixed martial arts podcast. I'm Chad Dundas. That's Ben Folks. We are both longtime MMA journalists, and for nearly the last 13 years, we've been meeting here every week to break down all the action in the wild, weird, and occasionally wonderful world of mixed martial arts. Ben, the UFC is back this weekend after taking a week off. We are headed down to Kansas City, one of the ubiquitous T-Mobile centers, where Ian Machado, Garry, and Carlos Prates are your welterweight main event. This, of course, another one of those fight nights that is one rung up from an Apex show, because you've got people on this card that you've heard of before, and we felt like it was consequential enough to take it on the road. Anthony Smith is on this card. Giga Chikadze. That's not a name I've heard in a long time. Michel Pereira is also on this card. Randy Brown. Chris Gutierrez. Yeah, some names. You got some names on this card, which is a nice change of pace. So we're going to talk about that, what it means for both Ian Garry and Carlos Prates, etc., etc. But first, not exactly MMA related, but it feels like what everybody was talking about over the weekend, and indeed what everyone in some ways continues to talk about, the two-night extravaganza that has become WrestleMania these last handful of years. I didn't watch a ton of it, but I did watch the three-way main event on night one, which sounded like it was received as the best match on the card of both days. I got the impression that maybe you watched a little bit more of it than I did, possibly relating to your job. So I wanted to spend a few minutes just shooting the shit about that, and obviously the place of most interest to our listeners and to us specifically. Dana White got the shit booed out of him
twice
at WrestleMania, not once, but twice. This thing was in Las Vegas, was it not?
Yeah.
Is that where we were at? Dana White's home damn town. And they're out here booing him out of the joint.
Well, it seemed like the first time they showed him, you heard, I would say, a smattering of boos. And I don't know if we decided like, hey, let's show him again later just to give him another crack at it. Because the second time it was like everybody else had caught on and they were like, oh yeah, boo this man. And the look on his face was just sort of like, oh, I'm going to be a good sport about it, but also I don't love it. I don't love what's happening right now, which, you see what's happening here the same way that we're doing it at UFC events, where we're making sure to have at least one or two WWE personalities in the crowd that we can cut to now that we're all under the same umbrella, the same TKO Group Holdings LLC umbrella. And we're doing it the other way. We had some UFC fighters and people we could cut to in the crowd here, but it was a good reminder that these are different fan bases.
Yeah.
And they, especially politically and culturally, skew different, because Dana White's used to being the beloved dear leader of the UFC to especially the live event going fan base for the UFC. The people who are buying tickets, showing up at a UFC event, they love to cheer Dana. They have mostly positive feelings about him, it seems. He's just like a celebrity who's part of the show to them, and they love it. And then you show up at the WWE events where if they know you, they probably know you for some not great treatment of the fighters in the UFC. They might be aware of controversies about fighter pay, shit you said about various UFC fighters over the years, criticisms that you have leveled at professional wrestling over the years. And they also probably know you for your hardcore Trump support at this point. And the wrestling crowd is a more liberal-leaning crowd than the UFC crowd. And that, I think, is what was really going on here.
Yeah. It brought to mind to me the thing that Matt Riddle said to you years ago when he was here in our hometown of Missoula, Montana, to wrestle at an event that you and I helped promote. It was after hours. You guys were carousing, I guess, is the right way to put it. And Matt Riddle said something to the effect of, in MMA, you can get knocked out in your hometown and the crowd will go crazy and cheer. In wrestling, I can't remember exactly what he said, but he alluded to something like people are there to appreciate the skills and the art. Yeah. Okay. Lay it on
the
us.
actual quote. This was from an MMA Junkie story that I wrote in 2018. We were carousing. This quote was given to me at the Silver Dollar Bar in downtown Missoula, but we were carousing on the record. And I was interviewing him and asking him about, because this was kind of early in his days of going from having been a UFC fighter, sort of left the sport after these lengthy suspensions for marijuana, which, you know, the culture gradually caught up to Matt Riddle's position on marijuana, it seemed, in MMA. And then he went over in wrestling, was having a good career. And I was asking him what he felt like the differences were. And he said, quote, "Wrestling fans are like people going to see Shakespeare. They come, they have a favorite character, they're invested in the story, and they know it's a story. They're all about how well you play your part, whatever that part is. MMA fans are more like people going to the Coliseum. They don't care whether you kill the tiger or the tiger kills you. All they know is somebody's going to die today. That's how it feels when you're in the UFC." And yet he did go on to say, like, you can get knocked out in your hometown and they're going to cheer. That they just, a lot of them are just there to see the violence and they not really care that much about personalities or stories or anything. And there's definitely some truth to that. You know, there's a reason that there is a semi-popular t-shirt that says pro science, pro choice, pro wrestling, and there is not an MMA equivalent that you see around, you know? So that I think is definitely noticeable. So you know what else is noticeable? The difference when you're sitting there and watching WrestleMania, and I watched the entire thing. I watched both nights. I edited so many wrestling stories last week that I just accidentally got myself really interested in it.
They got you hooked. They hooked you.
You know, and that's been my life with pro wrestling, is in and out as a fan. You know, sometimes I'll drift away, something will get me back in. And then when I am watching it, it's all the same familiar feelings. Like I had friends over last night to watch night 2, and a lot of them had never seen any pro wrestling before, definitely never watched a WrestleMania before. And they were saying stuff like, oh man, like I am entertained, but I'm also unsatisfied. I'm pissed off about some stuff, but I had a good time watching other stuff. And I'm like, there you go. That's the experience. Like that's what you can count on. Yeah. And when you're watching it, especially when it's 2 nights, because you'll see the people who you can see in the front row seats, you know, the first couple rows of seats there behind the ring. And you could see it's the same people. Like, you know, there's one guy who's right there in the corner where you're like, he's going to wear a different tank top, but he's going to wear a tank top both nights. There's a woman in bright pink with like bright green pigtails. You can see her and watch her reactions to the matches. She's invested. She's all, it's not casino comps all the way through. It's not people who got these tickets one way or another, but aren't that invested and won't show up until halfway through the night. It's people, they are packed in there from the word go, and they are all in. They are totally invested in this whole thing. They're there to see the entire show. It's a different kind of crowd than what you see at a UFC live event crowd. And maybe that's part of what Dana White was hearing when they were booing the very mention of his name.
Yeah, I wonder if he expected that, or if that was something that we had to break down in the back.
I mean, don't you think it's a little bit like the same Nickelback phenomenon we heard, where everybody will always talk about how Nickelback sucks, but to Nickelback, their world is showing up at arenas full of people cheering for them because they came to see Nickelback. You must be a fan. And so it like would surprise them to hear like, there's a joke going around about people don't like Nickelback because in their world, people fucking love Nickelback. And that's, I think Dana White, a lot of his exposure to like big groups of people is when he's showing up at the ones that already like him and the ones that they're already disposed to cheer for Dana White. And when you show up at one where it's just like, these are not your people. These people, in fact, have developed opinions about you and they don't like you. That probably is surprising to him because in Dana White's world, people love Dana White.
Doesn't seem like he's surrounded himself with a lot of people who are offering him unbiased criticism these days. And so maybe it is a surprise to show up in his hometown. That's one of the things that gets me. This is where he lives. If there was anywhere in the country that you would expect would give Dana White some cheers, it might be Las Vegas. Or, you know, obviously the WrestleMania crowd is mostly people who travel in for the event. But maybe the Vegas locals are like, that's the guy who tore down all those houses so he could build a giant fence around his mansion or whatever.
We could have a weapons room. I'd say my by far most retweeted and liked tweet was a Dana White adjacent one, where my favorite moment of WrestleMania was that triple threat match between, Seth Rollins, Roman Reigns, and CM Punk. CM Punk, you noted, you were like, CM Punk could look a little old.
It's on my list of stuff to discuss about WrestleMania was the text that I sent you that said, Phil is looking pretty old out there. At one point during the broadcast, I can't remember who it was, but somebody said something about CM Punk's lightning quick reflexes being one of the things that continually saves him in his career. And I was like, are they trolling right now? Are they ribbing Phil right now?
Pat McAfee being stoned as hell, not knowing what the hell he's talking about. I have words to say about Pat McAfee in a moment, but the best moment to me is Seth Rollins, who I've become a fan of just because I love his I'm not taking any of this shit that seriously vibe, comes out there and is doing the flamethrower thing. He's wearing a black robe. People are singing along to his music. Then the arena goes dark for a couple seconds. People keep singing along with the music. And when it comes back on, he's in an all white sparkling suit so that when the light hits him, he looks like a goddamn angel. And I love it. I love the contrast. It's a great showmanship, all this stuff. It just creates like a wow moment during the event. And I joked that Dana White was sitting in the crowd watching this and being like, this sucks. Why aren't they all just walking out in the same clothes, getting into the ring? Let's get that part over with so we can show a close-up of Trump and the agriculture secretary or the FBI director or some shit like that. That went over big with the wrestling crowd. But it was just like, yeah, you are reminded in some of those kind of moments where you're like, they're going to give you a show. They know that the show part is what you're here for. I was watching that clip of Werner Herzog when he's talking about his love of pro wrestling with Conan O'Brien, I think from a few years back. And he was like, they cut to commercials during the matches. So the matches are not that important. What's important is like the show, the drama, all that kind of stuff. And you're watching it being like, yeah, man. Like Dana White, I saw him afterwards saying like, oh, it's great to see it at Allegiant Stadium. It's going to make me, I'm convinced we want to do a stadium show for the UFC kind of stuff. And it was just like, I hope that's true. I hope that you went to this thing, you watched some pro wrestling, which we know is not really your thing, and you saw that you can have some fun at these things. You can have a big, loud, dumb show and people will love it. It ain't got to be everybody just walking out in the fucking Venom gear and get to the next one and let's move on and don't let anybody draw too much attention to themselves.
Well, I highly doubt that Dana White is suddenly going to start putting off a fun vibe. It's been a couple decades, I think, since Dana White put off any kind of fun vibe. One of the things that, again, might be of general interest here that I've seen a lot of people talking about, in fact, it's been in the news for a couple months since it started, is the John Cena heel turn that led us into WrestleMania. And when I say I didn't watch much of WrestleMania, I've been, I have followed some of the top line happenings of WWE at arm's length. I tuned into Raw a couple times to watch some John Cena heel action because that is something that got my attention. And frankly, I thought he was crushing it. I thought he was doing a stupendous job of John Cena, the John Cena character showing up as a heel, just with his sort of like logical explanation of how John Cena could become jaded and turn into this bad guy. But
you see where he yelled at the kid?
That kid was a plant, dude. Like that's not a real kid.
That kid has a future, because that kid's face after John Cena yells, everybody, including that one kid right there, are bad people, basically. And you see that kid's face, and you're just like, oh, buddy.
There's no way that kid was not a plant. I saw Ariel this week talking about how the thing that bothers him about the John Cena heel turn is that you can tell John Cena is playing a character and that no one is really going to believe that John Cena is a dick after John Cena has spent the last couple of decades being the nicest guy in wrestling, donating, I think, more time to the Make-A-Wish Foundation and other charitable endeavors than any other celebrity. I think I've seen that reported places. But I don't know, man. That's what wrestling is. Like everybody out there is playing a character, right? And I am going to appreciate the skills with which John Cena can do it. I'm not sitting around being like, oh, the Undertaker is out there playing a character, so like I can't enjoy him for whatever 50 years that he was in the WWE or whatever. So I don't know. I feel like John Cena has done a great job. And obviously we were always headed into a situation where John Cena's last match turned into not John Cena's last match because this is wrestling.
I understand what you're saying, but I also understand what Ariel's saying, because it's like, you ever go see like a movie, especially when it's like a period piece, and there's an actor in it where you're like, I saw this person in a Fast and Furious movie. I know that they are not a 1920s newspaperman. Like, you can't. I understand it's a movie. I always understand that, like, none of these people are really, on an 1870s steamship in whatever period piece I'm watching. But some people, you just look at their face and you're like, no, I do not buy it. You're ruining the illusion for me, because you're forcing me to confront over and over again that it's fake, that it's all just pretend. You do not have a face that anybody in 1920s had. Like, it just, you can't have it both ways. You can't be the handsome Botox person and also get us to believe that you're like a miner in like turn of the century Wales or something. Like, it's just not going to work. And so I think that there's a little bit of that going on. And it also seems like that because like you get a sense that like John Cena's doing it because this was the place left to go with his storyline. Like, this was fresh territory that you could go, not necessarily because it felt true or that it felt like anything that was mirroring what was going on in real life. I also think, though, just when you're watching that match that he had with Cody Rhodes at the main event, you're just waiting for something big to happen, and you're waiting for it to be like somebody else. Like, is The Rock going to show up? Is some crazy shit going to happen? And the only thing they give you even close to that is Travis Scott is going to come and mildly interfere. And I'm like, first of all, I'm not finding out who Travis Scott is. You can't make me. It's the same way you won't be able to make me find out who Jelly Roll is. Like, you just can't do it. And people, it's the main event, so people are waiting for it to be like bigger and better than everything they've seen before, and then it's just not. And everybody goes, well, that was a real letdown. Like, all the drama and shit they got out of that triple threat match with Paul Heyman delivering not one but two nut shots, tossing the chair around, like, all that is way better. It leaves you with a, like, you really feel like you saw something. You went on an emotional ride, and this really felt just like pretty basic, and so people didn't love it. But as I was explaining to my friends, they were like, this is making me mad. And I was like, are they trying to make you mad? Maybe they are. You never know what's real. Part of the fun of it is talking about what's real and what's not, and getting mad and talking about how they could have done it better. That's just part of the ride you're on, I guess.
I just rediscovered the pleasure of watching wrestling when you don't watch wrestling that much. Because I recall when I used to be more heavily into wrestling, the lead up to WrestleMania was always great. And then WrestleMania itself was always a letdown, because obviously WrestleMania is where they're like, we're going to bring in all the celebrities. We're going to have a guy who is popular but is no longer on the roster show up and win the main event. We're going to have all these kind of like special attractions that aren't necessarily marketed toward wrestling fans. But when I turned in to watch this 3-way main event on Friday night, Saturday night, whenever it was, man, I was entertained and I didn't give a shit. I saw people online afterwards being like, oh, how could you have Seth Rollins go over? It's the worst choice. Should have been either of the other two guys. And I was like, I did not care. I do not care that Seth Rollins won the match. I thought it was great. Whereas maybe if I had followed the WrestleMania storylines closely for the last 6 months, I would be mad too. But I wasn't. I loved it. And so it was like eating a bunch of sugar when you don't normally eat sugar. Yeah, you just get that. You love it. It's great.
Yeah, I mean, I had a good time. I did not regret at all my decision to spend a couple nights watching it, and a nice break from the world of MMA, where now we're back to yet another T-Mobile. I mean, this one, you noted it at the top. This one, right, is the T-Mobile Center. The other one is the T-Mobile Arena.
You say other one like maybe there's only one more.
How many other ones are there? And what are they? Do we have a T-Mobile Pavilion?
If you told me there was 1,000 T-Mobile sports parks somewhere, I would believe you. Every time we turn around, there's a new T-Mobile. Remember, you're listening to the Co-Main Event podcast proper. This show drops every Tuesday afternoon for free in your timelines and podcast libraries. But if you want even more of the Co-Main Event, you can find Ben Folks and myself all week over on Patreon. Hit us up at patreon.com/co-main event and get loads of extra audio and video content, as well as access to our official Discord message board where they're talking fights and a lot of other stuff literally all the time. Hit us up at patreon.com/co-main event. We got a bunch of handy tiers of patronage. Join the team at patreon.com/co-main event. Another great way to support the show is by going to our merchandise shop. That's over on our website, co-mainevent.com. Go to the top of the page, click the link that says shop. We got it all over there. We got hats and hoodies. We got beach towels. We got tote bags. Stop by and pick up the best-selling Daddest Man on the Planet coffee mug or the newly released Daddest Man on the Planet t-shirt. Also, don't forget, in celebration of his recent title win, we got those Volcamania t-shirts on sale all month. Head over to the Co-Main Event shop and get 15% off a Volcamania shirt until May 1st. Or while we can keep them in stock because this baby's a hot seller, use the code VOLKBACK, all one word, VOLKBACK, VOLKBACK. That's your code to get 15% off a Volcamania t-shirt. As always, we partner with our guy, Johnny Ashcroft, on the merchandise shop. He is a designer from Portland, Oregon. We can't recommend his work highly enough for all your design needs. Hit him up at studiosuperconductor.com or on Instagram at Studio Superconductor right now, like we always do about this time. Let's do a little bit of listener mail.
Listener mail.
First piece of listener mail this week. Okay, this is a follow-up. Actually, this is not on the list of mail that I sent to you earlier this morning as part of our extensive pre-production process.
You're ambushing me, is what you're saying.
For the proper. Yes, but I think it's going to be okay. It's from Rox, R-O-X, who writes to say, to answer your question from last week's podcast, I'm a Scouser, and I can confirm that we do not go around calling people, quote, little sausage or little mushroom. That's all Patty. That's just Patty. Hope that helps.
That does help.
Yeah.
Because it gives me a greater appreciation for him, you know, that this is just his thing and not like a regional thing that we're just unaware of, that he really is an innovator in the insult space.
It was also pointed out by a couple of listeners that maybe there at times are some either racial or cultural undertones to Patty Pimblett's humor. Didn't cite any specific examples. I know Patty Pimblett has said some things, perhaps I want to say about immigrants in the UK in the past that seemed problematic, but I'm going to go with Little Mushroom. I don't know if that could be offensive to various groups. So unless someone tells me different, I'm just going to continue to call you, Ben Folks, Little Mushroom. You little.
Don't you dare.
Yeah. See?
Those are fight words. I will not stand for it. I will not sit here and be called a mushroom by the likes of you sausage.
You little sausage.
I do. I mean, okay, I do remember people bringing up that he had some questionable views on immigration, which I guess it is MMA. So what do you expect? This does remind me, though. Did you see Conor McGregor did like a sit down with Tucker Carlson, who I did not watch it. I'll tell you that right now. But I'm guessing we didn't at any point bring up like, hey, what about you recently being an adjudicated rapist? But in talking about how he wants to run for president of Ireland, and he was laying out his strategy for dealing with immigrants, which was that like you commit a crime and you're out of here immediately. And I was just like, sir, you are a flawed messenger for that plan right off the bat, because not only have you committed a bunch of crimes, you came to our country and committed some crimes. We got you on the videotape committing several crimes on American soil. By your own logic, you shouldn't be allowed back here. By your own logic, you might be ought to be kicked out of Ireland. So, if we're looking for some kind of like internal logical consistency from MMA fighters, maybe that's on us for even asking it. But yeah, that's about where the bar is. Just so you know.
Just like you will not be forced to learn who Jelly Roll is, I will not be forced to learn anything more about Conor McGregor's discussions with Tucker Carlson. Next question this week comes to Chris, who I believe hit us up on Blue Sky the other day to ask about this. I told him to email the podcast, and he did. He says, I haven't heard you guys dissect the GFL yet. Seems like this guy never had the money to do this anyway. Why do so many fighters fall for an obvious scam? What was this guy's end game when he didn't actually have the money? So we talked about this last week on the Patreon Power Hour over there on the Patreon page. This, you wrote this story last week on the Uncrowned, talked to, was it Darren Owen, who is the CEO and head honcho comptroller of the GFL, basically about the decision to cancel its first two scheduled events and some of the fighters that were voicing grievances and talking about stuff that had happened behind the scenes. And in the words of who was it? It was who called it a scam?
Alan Belcher.
Alan Belcher. That's who it was. Alan Belcher said, for lack of a better term, it was a scam. I don't know, man. Pretty much everyone could tell that this thing wasn't going to happen except for the people who were putting up the money and the fighters who signed, is what it felt like to me.
I'll say this, just based on my own impression, I don't believe that this guy, that Darren Owen, set out to scam people. I don't think he was like, here's what I'll do. I'll come up with a fake fight promotion. We'll do a draft. We'll have a rap song. There'll be an AI video of Fabricio Verdum in armor. We'll do all this shit, and it's all just like a Ponzi scheme, and we'll never have any fights, and I'll just pocket all the money and walk away. Like, I don't believe that that's what was happening. I believe it's way more likely that he was overly ambitious and not at all realistic. I believe he thought he would pull this off. Like, he thought, like a lot of fight promoters have thought before, I'll do the part where I just generate the publicity and get people talking, get the interest up, and the money part will figure itself out right down to the wire. I think that's what he thought he was going to do here. And that, all right, I'll get the investors as I get like the attention up. More people will want to invest. And by the time we have to do a show, we'll have the money to do the show. And it just, anybody who has seen how things go in the sport could tell that was probably not going to happen. And so it didn't happen. And as for the question of why did so many people, like fighters, fall for this when it was obvious to a lot of the rest of us that this was not going to work out? Because they wanted to believe, man. Somebody comes along being like, hey, you guys who, your time in this sport has now passed, but I am willing to pay you guys a bunch of money to kind of trade on your name, essentially. And they wanted to believe that that was true. Bunch of money for being somebody who was good 10 years ago. Like, yeah, they know those opportunities aren't going to come around much anymore. And so they wanted it to be true that somebody was going to pay them a bunch of money just for who they used to be, kind of, and to go out there one more time and give it another go. That was an attractive idea to them. And so they talked themselves into it, even when, you look at it from the outside and you go, there's a very good chance that none of this ever happens.
Yeah. I don't think scam is the right word. And maybe for no other reason than I doubt that Darren Owens is exactly making a bunch of money on this. It seems like more likely that the opposite thing is happening to Darren Owen. But I know, I say that not knowing anything about the actual financials or lack thereof of the GFL. Probably pipe dream might be a better word for this, though. You do make good points about the fact that a guy comes into Springfield saying he's going to build a monorail. A lot of the rest of us know that it's not going to happen, but the good folks of Springfield, maybe they buy in.
I mean, they honestly, in fairness, got more of a monorail than the GFL got fights. So
next question this week comes to us from your old pal Steve in London, who writes, been a while. Good to see you, Steve. You know what's gone on even longer? Dana White announcing that he had dirt on Francis Ngannou and declaring, quote, someday I'll tell the story. I was all about Francis in the beginning, and then I found out who Francis was. As always, I trusted Dana's word unequivocally, but then nothing happened. It's been 6 months, and Dana is still keeping this totally real goss to himself. What's the deal here? Is this just classic, kind and empathetic Dana White not wanting to disparage another man? Or is there something else going on? It feels like our old pal Steve has tongue firmly planted in cheek with
Yeah.
this.
Okay, the thing is, too, Dana. We've heard Dana White do this with a couple other people. I remember when he was doing it to the Sherdog guys when he got mad at them way back in the day.
Did the exact same thing to Randy Couture. The exact same thing.
Yes, where you're just basically being like, "Oh, these guys dirty, dirty. I can't even tell you some of the dirty shit these guys have done. The shit I know about these guys. Someday I'll tell you. I don't even want to get into it. That's how bad it is." And then just never mentioning it again and trying to leave it at that. Just like trying to throw out as broad and vague an implication and accusation as possible so that whatever seems dirty and super bad to you, you will fill that in, and not giving any details at all because he doesn't fucking have any, because it's all bullshit to begin with, and just trying to let that work in your imagination and then be like painting it as if like he has too much dignity to get down in the muck and talk about how that's how dirty you are. He doesn't want to soil himself by even talking about the dirty deeds that you have done. Meanwhile, I still keep thinking about stuff he was saying about Francis, where he was like, "Hey, I wanted to get rid of him. My guys told me to keep him," which again, right there suggests that maybe you're not the world's greatest fight promoter if you wanted to get rid of that guy who you made a bunch of money off of and could have made way more off of if you just treated him right. And you said, "Hey, I wanted to get rid of him. They talked me into keeping him." And I was just like, "I told you so." And what I told my guys was, when somebody shows you who they are, believe them. And then what did he do after that? A couple months later, you see Dana White can't wait to welcome the Tate boys back to America. Chad, he was over there dapping them up, being like, "Welcome back to America. Good to have you guys here." Gave them seats at the UFC event. And then the next week, one of those dudes gets accused of sexual assault again. And you're just like, or have those people not showed you who they are? Because they showed the rest of us who they are. You have a bunch of friends, it seems, who are of a very questionable character, who the rest of us feel like they have showed us who they are. You're still friends with them. The one guy that you don't like is one you will make non-specific accusations against, is Francis Ngannou. Come on. We all see what's happening there.
I mean, is it possible that Francis Ngannou is a bad person in real life? Yes, of course that's possible. We have been around the game long enough to believe that if you like a fighter, you should never Google their name, because so many of the people in this sport turn out to be bad people in real life. But I feel like we know more about Francis Ngannou than we do, certainly more than your average MMA fighter, right? We know more about his actual life than we do almost anybody else in this sport. He has one of the best inspirational stories in all of sports. Lots of people have talked to him. Lots of people have worked behind the scenes with Francis Ngannou. I've been to his house. He offered me body armor out of his body armor branded dorm fridge, Ben, folks.
I mean, yeah, if he is a bad person in real life and behind the scenes and we don't know it, he's doing a much better job than everybody else of keeping it from us.
Doing a much better job than Dana White of keeping it from us. Literally no one has said this about Francis Ngannou except Dana White. He's the only guy who has said this about him.
Which then makes you think like, hey, what do you have to do to be a bad guy in Dana White's eyes? It's not trafficking women. It's not sexual assaults. It's not all, hitting women. It's not all this other kind of stuff. You can do all that and still be a pretty good guy in his eyes. But if you stand up for yourself on fighter pay, if you criticize the way the UFC treats its fighters, if you demand to be treated like, an athlete at that same level in any other sport, then you become a bad guy. That's when it happens. That's when you cross over.
Or when your broadcast deal goes tits up. Then all of a sudden you're Spuke TV, right?
Yeah.
Next question this week comes to us from Donnie D in the Place to Be, who writes, "Guys, it looks like Amanda Nunes will return. Exciting in some ways for a potential fight against Kayla Harrison and the potential to bring the women's bantamweight division back to prominence. But then there are all the depressing fears about fighters coming out of retirement. Give me your take on the Lioness coming back." Ben, this is another thing that we talked about last week. On the Patreon page, Amanda Nunes does seem Like she is headed back to the octagon, coming out of retirement to fight the winner of Juliana Pena and Kayla Harrison. And I agree with Donnie D in the place to be. In some ways, it will be good to have Amanda Nunes back because it doesn't feel like either of these divisions that she at one point was champion of recovered from her absence. One of them, I don't even know if we have it anymore. Maybe we don't.
I don't think we do.
Could be. But women's bantamweight, which you could argue historically is the marquee women's division, just hasn't felt like it's had much life at all since Amanda Nunes left. And now, especially with the potential of a Kayla Harrison win over Juliana Pena when they fight, coming up at UFC. When are they fighting? They got this thing on the books. Let me see. UFC 316. Shoot, that's coming right up. If Kayla Harrison wins that, then you got a super fight on your hands. Amanda Nunes versus Kayla Harrison. But Amanda Nunes is also 36 years old. And so the question has to be asked, what does she have left if she comes back? And how long is she staying? Is she doing a George St. Pierre here, where she's going to come back, win the title, peace out again, make Dana White real mad at the post-fight press conference? Or would we be looking at Amanda Nunes again trying to make a home for herself, I guess, for lack of a better term, in the UFC, which when you're 36 years old, yes, does bring up certain fears and certain, I guess, pessimistic ideas.
Yeah, especially because after she left and was kind of explaining her decision to walk away when she did, she mentioned, potentially serious stuff like nerve damage in her leg. And, maybe that stuff, she's had enough time off. She's felt like she's healed. She feels like she's still got more left in the tank. You're right. At 36, you kind of go, ooh, I don't know, especially because of who she is. She would kind of have to just jump right back in and fight Kayla Harrison, who has been getting better. We've watched Kayla Harrison improve and get more comfortable in a lot of different situations in MMA over the last few years. And you got to come out of retirement after a few years of inactivity, no time really to take a warm-up fight or sharpen the skills or anything. You got to jump right in there against Kayla Harrison. That's tough. I mean, if she, it's not as if there's anything really left to prove for Amanda Nunes. You think about all the GOAT conversations that we have in a bunch of different divisions in this sport. The one that we don't have ever any argument on is the women's MMA GOAT, not just of a division, not just whether it's the women's bantamweight division, but the women's MMA GOAT. We do not have any discussion on that one because we all know who it is. It's Amanda Nunes. And so there's nowhere really that far up you can go from there. I mean, yeah, she adds to the legend of Amanda Nunes as she comes back, beats Kayla Harrison after years away, becomes UFC champion again. But you're right, you kind of wonder, then what? I mean, the women's bantamweight division could really use her. It hasn't been a whole lot going on, hasn't been much of interest happening there. So she comes back, she does immediately inject some excitement into that division again. It's a lot to ask of herself to show up and beat Kayla Harrison. And it seems like it feels to me we're walking into the classic scenario of somebody's about to find out that they should have stayed retired, that it was a good idea, that they did it right the first time,
Yeah, that is the fear. Last question this week comes to us from Devin Scott, who writes, I must say I am genuinely thrilled, if slightly confused, to see that the PFL has apparently taken a page from the Sir Nigel Longstock playbook. Who else but the esteemed theatricalist could have dreamed up something as gloriously absurd as the dude wipes holy shit moment? If that wasn't Sir Nigel, then we may be witnessing a copyright violation in real time. And if not Sir Nigel, then who else is the brave visionary willing to say the quiet part out loud? Who is the brave visionary willing to say the quiet part out loud about what is essentially an adult baby wipe? In any case, I applaud whoever at the PFL is channeling the spirit of velvet jackets, open-handed slaps, and uncomfortable poetic phrasing. The sport is better for it. Do you still enjoy finding the unintentional humor of this sport? It's kind of what keeps me smiling. Yours in high culture and moist towelettes, Devin Scott. Okay, here's the thing about this. The PFL dude wipes holy shit moment, which obviously is a highlight that they show, and then they say, oh, it's the dude wipes holy shit moment. Devin is actually underselling it here because Devin spells the name of this this featured spot, the dude wipes holy shit moment, Holy, the word holy. Mm-hmm. On the PFL broadcast, Ben Folks.
Don't say it. Don't tell me.
They spell it HOLE-Y. Holy shit moment. Do you see what they did there?
I wish I didn't. I wish I hadn't seen what they did there, because that is way worse.
Yeah.
You know, it is interesting, especially something like that, where it's like, this is a sponsor activation thing. This went before a whole bunch of eyes. You know, a whole bunch of people had to sign off on saying they thought this was a good idea. When I was watching WrestleMania with some friends on Sunday night, this was my chance to see several of them encounter even the concept of dude wipes for the first time. They'd never heard of it. They don't watch, you know, they're not in dude adjacent spaces. They don't watch any combat sports. And so my friend Casey, she was just like, wait a minute. What is dude wipes? And then you just got to tell her, it's what you think it is. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry you had to find out this way. I'm sorry you had to find out at all. If I hadn't invited her over, she might have gone the rest of her life and not had to learn about dude wipes. If I told her about this, about the holy shit moment, I don't know what it would do to her. She might spend the rest of her days in a sanitarium, just staring out at a placid lake, longing for death. Because it's just, how do you come back from that?
If you're the PFL, I guess I'm glad you still have sponsors at all. You know, and Dude Wipes has got to be kind of a marquee sponsor for the PFL at this point, right? That's a product we've heard of here in the MMA space. Unlike Casey, we've been aware of Dude Wipes for over a decade.
God, has it been that long?
At one point, Dude Wipes sent us at the show some complimentary Dude Wipes. Here you go. Try them out. See what you think. See if you have your own holy shit moment.
Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ. It says something about this sport that you start to think about it. You're like, all right, dude wipes, Manscaped, Condom Depot. They're just geographically on the human body. There's something we're focusing on here.
A certain area, you might say. All right, that's going to do it for listener mail this week. If you have a question, comment, or concern that you would like to air to the podcast in future weeks, you know how to do it. You go to the website comainevent.com and you click the link at the top right-hand corner of the screen that says email the podcast. That'll get you in touch with us. Right now, we are going to go ahead and get started with our discussion of, actually, let me ask you this before we move on, Ben folks. Would you rather talk about Ian Machado Garry versus Carlos Prates, or the things that the Netflix dude had to say when he was asked about the possibility of bringing the UFC to the flicks?
I mean, both of those seem like topics of interest.
You got to decide right now, on air.
I guess I'll take the flicks.
Okay, the flicks is definitely something people say, by the way. All right, coming up after the break, we're going to talk about the flicks. All right, Ben. Flicks CEO of the Flicks, Ted Sarandos, was asked about the company's interest in the UFC during a investors call sometime last week. I'm looking at Damon Martin's story on MMA Fighting. Here is what he had to say. I'm not going to comment on any of those specific opportunities at this time, but I will steer you back to the letter to show you that our live event strategy is unchanged. We remain really focused on the big breakthrough events. Our audiences love them. So anything we chase in the event space or the sports space is a deal that would have to make economic sense as well. Live is a relatively small part of our content spend. We have about 200 billion view hours, so small relative to view hours too. Yeah, some TV talk there. But that said, all viewing is not equal. What we have seen with live is a very outsized positive around conversion and acquisition, and we suspect retention. We're really excited to keep building on that. He mentions that they have the Taylor versus Serrano rematch coming up in July, and it seems like, you know, they are interested in these big tentpole events like Mike Tyson versus Jake Paul, things of that nature. Some of the people in the MMA space have taken this to mean that perhaps Netflix is not as interested in the UFC as we might have assumed that they would be, given Netflix's gradual seeming growing interest in live sports, and B, the fact that WWE is already over there, and obviously WWE and the UFC are under the same TKO banner. Does this read that way to you? Because I listen to this, I read this. I don't think it sounds, he's not saying, yes, give it to me, it's mine. He's not saying that about the UFC. But I read this and I think to myself, could you consider, for example, UFC pay-per-views, quote unquote, breakthrough events? Maybe you could.
Yeah, but pay-per-views ending up on Netflix would really surprise me. See, if it wasn't for the fact that Raw is already on Netflix, I would view this a little differently. Because would you describe WWE Raw as a breakthrough event? Like, I wouldn't. It's a weekly content show, essentially, and it's a popular one, and it will bring an audience to you that maybe you feel like you didn't have enough of a chunk of beforehand. But it's not a Mike Tyson, Jake Paul one-off kind of event. It's not even a one-off kind of event like where he talks about doing NFL games on Christmas Day or whatever, where that at least you can be like, hey, here's a sports day you kind of have to yourself. You don't go all in on trying to get NFL rights on the season. You just get some of these games. And that will, you could see how for Netflix, they would look at it and be like, what we're trying to gain is subscribers. We're trying to get somebody to be like, I want to see this thing. There's only one place I can see it. I'll go to Netflix. And not necessarily trying to build out the content library because we feel like we got a lot of shit on there right now. And if you can just focus on, hey, you pick up some of these subscribers around one of these events, some of them cancel afterwards, but a lot of them don't. And that I could see making sense for them, especially as they look and see how interested do you want to get in sports. But the fact that they do have WWE Raw makes me think they would consider a UFC equivalent of that they could have if the price were manageable for them. That is the big thing. I'd also think that if you are going to be engaging in active negotiations, you don't want to come out and say, I mean, granted, this is like an investor call, so it's not like you can just bullshit and say whatever you want, but you don't want to come out and be like, we're determined to get those UFC rights at any price.
Yeah, we will pay anything, whatever they want.
Yeah, you don't help yourself at the negotiating table there. You might want the UFC executive or TKO executives to wonder if the market is not as strong as they hoped it would be for the renewal of those UFC rights. I still think the most likely scenario that we get is pay-per-views in some form stay with ESPN Plus, that you get some sort of weekly fight night show or semi-weekly fight night show on Netflix, and maybe even one other thing somewhere else. It's just, you know, a Rumble or Rumble equivalent kind of thing, you know.
The price could be an issue, as reports indicate that the UFC is looking for something around $1 billion per year. On the other hand, Netflix did give WWE a 5-year, $10 billion contract to bring Monday Night Raw to their platform. So if you want to give the UFC 5 years, you could get them for about half, perhaps, what you paid for Monday Night Raw. So I guess that is a possibility. Would you consider a breakthrough live event under the banner of breakthrough live event, the roast of Tom Brady? Would you put that up there with Tyson versus Paul in terms of mainstream audience penetration?
I wouldn't. Granted, I am definitely not the audience for that. There is an audience for stuff like that. It's definitely not me. I also feel like that might be one where you're going, we consider this a breakthrough event, ... in terms of what it cost us versus what it brought in. Because I don't see that being something that you got to pay tons and tons of money for, right?
Yeah, I guess. All right.
Have Dana White show up and be like, here are the jokes that the two of the funnier office workers at the UFC wrote for me to say here tonight. I got Jim Norton to give me the material he didn't want, and that's what I'm here to do tonight.
God, he'd be lucky if he got Jim Norton to write him some stuff. You know, it's Adam Martineau. What is it? Who's that guy? The MMA adjacent comedian? Adam.
Jim Norton
You know
is he's the other guy. Him and Matt Serra, right? Do that podcast. The one that I believe the New York Times referred to as a UFC fan podcast. So I'm still mad about it. This reminds me, I can't let us go before I talk about Pat McAfee's bullshit on the WrestleMania broadcast. I did not realize Pat McAfee was trying to be a wrestling commentator. I wonder if he realizes it. He does not seem to understand what that job is, like what the role of a commentator is in our pro wrestling broadcast. He doesn't add anything. He's just sort of getting in the way. He doesn't really have like a consistent, noticeable character he is doing as commentator. And sometimes he is just saying what is happening after, play-by-play guy has essentially said what's happening. He's just annoying to me. He sucks. He doesn't seem like he has any sort of like knowledge of how pro wrestling works or what he should be doing there. And the thing, and I know this is like one of his like kind of trademark things, how he's always sitting there with a pencil in his hand, Chad. And if you look at it, he's sitting there at the table with a pencil in his hand, and at times he will be the only person who doesn't have any paper in front of him. He's got a pencil. He does not have anything to write on. And I just feel like, don't that just capture it all? The guy where he's like, I want to look like somebody who's doing something. I've seen this before where somebody's sitting in front of a microphone behind a desk. They've got a writing implement. It makes them look like some kind of serious journalist, like I'm fucking Walter Cronkite or some shit. Let me go ahead and do that. I just want to mime the thing. I don't want to know even why they would have that or like what it's supposed to be for. I just want to look the part, and I don't even care enough to really look the part. Just a little bit. That's all I want. That's basically what he does in his regular job, where it's just like, I want all the tools of broadcast journalism and none of the training or ethics or responsibility that come with it.
You don't think he has like a detailed scouting report of CM Punk in front of him?
You don't think
it says check the leg kicks and it's underlined a couple times?
John Cena was going off on him afterwards, first of all, and being like, you smell like you're stoned right now, all this shit. And then he was just like, John Cena was like, I heard you saying that like I was doing something really fast. And he's like, I thought you were doing it fast. And he was just like, that's because you're high as hell, man. That's why you think it's really fast. It's not. I'm not fast anymore. And it was just like, man, you can tell. Even the other wrestlers, Paul Heyman was giving him shit. These guys do not like this guy. And he doesn't even seem to like know enough or understand enough about it to lean into being a heel commentator. Like at least that he could work with. And instead, he's just annoying while thinking he's cool.
There's a lot of that going around in our culture right now of guys who have seen somebody do something before and they're trying to look like they know what they're doing and they want all of the power and positives that go along with those stations, but without any of the ethics or training or aptitude.
Definitely don't want any other responsibility whatsoever.
Big fight for both Carlos Prates and Ian Machado Garry, Ben Folks, this Saturday. Garry obviously coming in off his first career loss when he dropped one to Shavkat Rakhmonov back at UFC 310 in what was meant to be a UFC welterweight title eliminator at the time, although perhaps Ian Garry put on a better showing than we thought. So you can't say that there were no positives, I think, in that loss. On the other hand, you got Carlos Prates undefeated in the UFC, 21-6 overall, part of the Fighting Nerds. So really creeping on a come up here. All of his UFC fights have ended in first or second round stoppages. He's most recently coming off the win over Neil Magny in November of last year. So either guy who wins this is going to get a significant lift. Ian Garry could prove not necessarily that he is a gatekeeper of sorts, but I think that he probably realistically belongs in the elite crowd at welterweight. And of course, Carlos Prates could prove with a win that he belongs, perhaps, in the elite crowd, that he could get bigger and more difficult tests moving forward. So I don't know. It's a fight that I like. I think it has a high potential to be fun, and it is the rare UFC fight that comes around, especially at the fight night level, that seems to have tangible, recognizable stakes. So bring it on. Let's do it.
Yeah. I would argue, though, this one, I agree with everything you said there. I think it will be a fun fight stylistically to watch, a good fight, a fight that feels like it's meaningful. I also think this is a dangerous one for Ian Garry, because coming off that Shavkat one, like, that was his first professional loss, but I don't think he really lost much in it, just because we didn't expect him to do that well, stepping up there to take on Shavkat. And we all kind of went like, you're in trouble, man. Shavkat is for real. He's going to run through you. And he didn't. It was a close fight. Ian Garry had some chances to win it at some point. And I think that even in a loss there, he managed to put his name into the sweepstakes for fight, like guys you might consider for a title shot with one or two more wins. And we weren't necessarily thinking of him like that beforehand. So like, that was a big moment for him. But you turn around with this one, because this is a tough fight. It's a tough matchup for him. This is a matchup you could fuck around and lose. And as much as people right now are giving him like, you looked good in defeat, we think that your stock went up, even though you posted an L on the record. If you lose this one, that can turn around in a hurry, where people will be like, Machado Garry's lost 2 in a row. He was only good against lower down people in the division. As soon as he ran up against some real guys, he started losing. He's a joke. He's not really anybody to take seriously in this weight class. And it's not that like if this feels like a fight he can't lose, but it also feels like a fight that you could lose. You definitely can lose this one, because that boy good. He's been knocking out everybody. And so like, it's a dangerous fight for Ian Garry to go into, and also one where like, he has a lot more to lose right now than Carlos Prates does, I think.
He also took it on somewhat short notice. Carlos Prates was supposed to fight Jeff Neal about 10 days ago at UFC 314. Neal dropped out on March 29th, and then Ian Garry stepped in. Of course, he's fighting Carlos Prates on April 26th, this Saturday, so about 1 month's notice. He is currently going off as a slight favorite. I'm sorry. Ian Garry minus 125, Carlos Prates plus 105. So odds makers like him by a slim margin. But I agree with you. You lose one, we can say you looked better than we thought. It's hard to have your stock keep rising when you lose 2. Hard to say that'll keep your stock up there. So it is a must win, I think, for Ian Garry. But like I said, interesting fight. I'm excited to watch it. So it's got that going for it. All right. I think that's going to do it this week for the co-main event podcast. Thanks everybody for listening. We'll be over at the Patreon page all week. Join us over there, patreon.com/co-main event. If you do, we'll see you tomorrow for the live chat. If you don't, we'll see you right back here next week. We appreciate the support. Thanks for listening, everybody. As for right now, we are done. We are through. We are out. Do you forget about Giga Chikadze? I do. I forget about him. Hasn't fought since last July, which that's not that long ago, but that was, he's only had one fight the last 2 years, one fight in 2023, one fight in 2024. Remember when Giga Chikadze was going to be a big deal?
Yeah. Remember the Giga kick?
Yeah. Now I see his name on the card. And I'm like, oh yeah, that guy, Giga Chikadze, old buddy.
He need to go out there and Giga chick somebody, get his name back in the news.
Well, maybe he can do that to David Onama.
Sure. What are the odds on a Giga kick? Plus 500? Give it to me.
Giga Chikadze is the plus 142 underdog. So probably you could get good odds on the Giga Kick method of victory bet.
I'm taking it.